Welcome to the Startup Club podcast, where we share the journeys of innovation, failure, resilience, and triumph of some of South Africa's most exciting tech startup founders and investors. I'm Matthew Marsden, founder of Startup Club, and on the show today, Abu Addae, co-founder of LifeCheq, the fintech democratising access to financial advice and using AI and technology to enable financial advisors to improve client experience and drive efficiency. Founded in 2015, LifeCheq is disrupting the multi-trillion rand financial services sector through its tech-first proposition that enhances the effectiveness and access to financial advice in the South African market. The business has since grown to a team of 75, is serving over 200,000 users, and has raised more than 100 million rand in venture capital from the likes of Naspers, Futuregrowth and ARC Investments. With the significant challenge comes a massive opportunity, and the team remains bullish on becoming the technology business that enables financial advice for the 2 billion underserved clients in emerging markets. Now, before we get into today's discussion, Startup Club ZA is built on impactful partnerships, and today's episode is brought to you in collaboration with our friends at Momentum Group. Momentum is South Africa's largest insurance-based financial services group, and through its various retail brands like Metropolitan and Momentum, and specialist brands like Guardrisk, Exponential, and Eris Property Group, the company exists to help businesses and people achieve their financial goals and life aspirations. We sat down with Momentum's Group Marketing Manager, Shelley Rick Hansen, to learn more about the group's mandate to enable innovation, support businesses, and a mission to enable entrepreneurs. And you can hear that conversation at the halfway mark of today's episode, or visit momentumgrouplimited.co.za. For now though, let's get back to the episode.
I think I wouldn't say don't do it. I would say that don't think it's not a glamorous thing to start a company. I think a friend of mine jokes that he's also a founder. We sometimes commiserate, and he's like, starting a business is you absolutely shouldn't do it unless there's something wrong with you, and this is somehow the cure, right? To start a business is what can cure the thing that's wrong with you. But in all seriousness, I do think that people tend to think that you start a company because you want to work for yourself, or you want to. That's not the reason. And you have to be obsessed with the problem at a level of obsession that is almost insane to carry you through how hard it really gets, right? When it gets really dark, you have to have something that still pulls you up, right? So if you don't have that level of conviction for something, it's just not worth it. And it's not the better ways to make money. They really are, right?
Sure. It can't be just about the money.
Exactly, sure. Right? Join a startup, join a corporate. There are many ways to kind of get involved in innovation. So it's not for everyone, but for those who can, right? And those who are sort of driven and like I said, that there is something wrong with you in a good way, in that like you're obsessed by a problem that you just have to solve, right? It's your duty, right? If you can do it, if you're in a position to actually be able to do it, it's your duty to try. In a country like ours, we need that.
South Africa's financial services sector is one of the most sophisticated on the continent, estimated to contribute nearly 23% of the country's GDP. With an estimated 6 trillion in assets under management as of 2022, the industry is rapidly evolving, fueled by technology, new market entrants, and the growing demand for personalized financial solutions. Yet, in such an established and highly regulated market, disruption is often easier said than done, and the barriers to transformation, commercially or digitally, are particularly prohibitive. At the same time, the need is greater than ever, where access to financial advice has historically been limited to only the higher earning segment of our population. Among the pioneers of this transformation is LifeCheq, a fintech scale-up founded by a team of seasoned industry leaders on a mission to revolutionize personal financial advisory by empowering individuals through personalized, data-driven advice. In today's episode, you'll meet the CEO behind the business and hear how the right team at the right time, through grit and customer centricity, is disrupting the financial services and advisory space for good.
I'd love to say that I was a model child and did all the right things, but I didn't. And I think, look, I mean, born in Ghana, Kumasi, in central part of Ghana to be precise, and grew up most of my life in South Africa, actually. So I was actually in South Africa a couple of years and then came back, but pretty much since age 11, I've been in SA, primary school, high school. But I think where I got a bit of, exposure to entrepreneurship was my dad was, he liked to side hustle.
Sure.
So he's a civil engineer, ran civil engineering practice, but he had all these other crazy side hustles. They were all rubbish, right? None of the side hustles actually made any sense. His consulting business actually did decently, and my brother runs that now. But he kind of like would have these like really out there ideas, right? And I just remember thinking, man, this man is brilliant, but God, he's a terrible business person. I need to study business because I need to know how to do this better. So that's how I got into it. I think that planted the seed, I would say.
And were you on the back of that? Would you consider yourself an entrepreneurial kid? Did you have a lemonade stand or selling things to people left and right in school?
I think, I guess immigrant kids, you kind of have that initial sort of push already. So like my dad was already like, hey, you need to be out there. You need to know how to do business. And, sold sweets at school, right? The usual, had the bike, all that stuff. And I think, I'm kind of like maybe being a little bit unfair to my dad. Like he had like good sort of instincts about business. He just wasn't trained in it, right? So you did kind of like, he would like do stuff to like, you would go sell the sweets and kind of come back. But also when he was doing a business, he would actually involve us, which I think was actually really important. I mean, he could have just been like, kids go play, but like we were there in the thick of it with him. And I think I wouldn't say that I would have been naturally that way inclined without that push, if I'm honest. Yeah.
So you've got that side of your brain being slowly formed. You mentioned that you were a little bit of a rebel as a kid, and you went to school here in South Africa, Eden Glen High School.
That's right.
Maybe talk to us about your time in high school. Were you an academic? Were you quite social? What was? Why do you describe yourself as a rebel?
So early on, look. So I think some of it just like I moved around a lot when I was a kid. So just a bit of early childhood, family. Lost my mom, moved around, but there was a bit of that stuff. And I think that kind of maybe unsettles you a little bit as a kid, right? So you don't realize that stuff until you're much older. But I think early as a student in Ghana, I was actually pretty good. I mean, I kind of had like you get skipped grades and that sort of thing. Then I came to SA with my dad and my brother, and it was kind of you get brought back a couple of grades. So I think it was just like boredom and wanting attention. So I had two brothers in the same school. One was a sports star, the other was a prefect, and I said, well, those two slots are taken, so I'm gonna be the kid who spent the most time in detention. So that was the record I was trying to break. And then
did you break it?
I probably did. I must actually go back and check the records. But
sure.
My dad again kind of saw that, listen, this kid's going off the rails, and actually moved us to Queen's College Boys High School in the bustling metropolis of Queenstown, with one main street and not much else going on. And the way to be a rebel then was to be a good student at maths. So that's kind of how I got really started.
So you basically fight your parents you fight your dad by doing well, because he sent you there for doing poorly.
Yeah, exactly. I had a point to prove. So
throw it to the system if you were. And so you do mention that I think you start focusing on your studies a lot more, and I do want to emphasize the maths and the sciences of the world, because that does have a material impact on early career for you and whatnot. I think before we get to you matriculating, which you do well in the early 2000s, what would you consider was your first actual job? The first job that you were kind of standing on your own 2 feet and you got a paycheck from?
So I got a job as a packer at Checkers when I was 14. And you weren't allowed to work at 14. So when the guy found out I was 14, he did fire me and say, you're not supposed to be here. So I was actually, but I earned a weekly wage. I can't remember how much it was, but it was like somewhere in the 20s of rands.
Sure.
But that was like the main thing. And then obviously, the selling sweets and that sort of thing. But I not until I worked at Old Mutual that I actually, earned more than I did selling sweets.
Sure,
So,
consider it a first job. Okay, we'll get there in a second, and I think why I just want us to take a quick moment that is you end up doing something quite impressive by most people's standards to get that job and move into the kind of insurance space. Before we get there, though, you matriculate 5 distinctions, so you've done well. I think you've said to me, even at our live event, you did well in the Eastern Cape, but it's different. Yeah. It's different going to the Western Cape or Gauteng, and you kind of matriculate. Did you know what you wanted to do? Did you know what you wanted to study?
Look, so again, it was all circumstantial stuff, right? So, my dad, yet again, I was fighting with him, and I bumped into a kid. He was sort of like a much older kid at the time. He had sort of just finished matric when I was in standard 9, and he was studying at UCT, and he came back to Queenstown with a swagger, and he kind of, he was quite excited about what he was doing. And I asked him, and he was like quite independent, right? Like he paid for his own ticket. I'm like, how are you doing this when you're a student? He's like, no, he's studying actuarial science, and he's got a bursary from Old Mutual. And I was like, this looks like financial freedom. So I don't care what actuarial science is about, but I want that. So yeah, that was all the career guidance there was in me choosing to do what I did. I did think about medicine, but it wasn't really me. So I had to put down second choice. I'm like, first choice actuarial science, second choice actuarial science, third choice maybe medicine. That sort of vibe. Yeah.
Ironically, one of the hardest degrees you can study.
I didn't actually know that at the time.
That's
I was like, sure. Yeah.
Sure. So you end up applying for this bursary. You get it, presumably, through Old Mutual, and go start studying AXI at UCT, to the point we were making earlier. And I think I experienced this, a number of folks who are academically inclined in their earlier years do. You get to university and you realize, gosh, this is a big pond. And these are some remarkable individuals, and I've kind of got a bit of career path ahead of me laid out because of this bursary. But maybe talk to us about because that season was quite material for you, right? It started to shape a lot of work ethic and a lot of things in you.
It was. Look, so coming into UCT, right? I mean, okay, so you do matric, you get 5 A's, you top 10 in the Eastern Cape, you think you're smart, but you get there and like actually you're near the bottom of the class in terms of like academic accomplishment, and actually everyone else is like, oh, you're also here. This is so inclusive, and there's a famous thing that they do within the actuarial circle at UCT, and I think all the sciences programs these days, you look to your left and look to your right. Those two guys are not going to be there when you graduate because this is a really hard program. And I could have sworn they were all looking at me, right? So I had this chip on my shoulder about actually, you know what? Damn it, I'm going to show you that actually, in fact, not only do I need to be here, I'm going to be one of the best, right? So I really grafted hard. I also partied hard, but then all the guys I was partying with at the end of first year all got academically excluded. So I was like, Jesus, this is a survivor guilt. So I think second, third year onwards, I was just like really focused. But it wasn't actually even just the studies. There was something else, and this kind of goes against the rebel narrative a little bit in that. So my dad and I always had a mixed relationship. I mean, now we're really close, but back then, when he was he was very happy about the fact that I was studying and trying to be a rebel by getting good marks. He and I were on the same page about that. But he bought me a book, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, when I was 15, and I read that book, and I actually wrote down what I want to do with my life at that point. And there was that sort of also idea of purpose, right? That was planted back then, which I thought it was big back then, but I actually didn't appreciate just how powerful it is to have that moment as a young person where you actually try to articulate a purpose for yourself, because that really drove me, right? And I ended up, I finished, winning the best actuarial science project in the country. At the end of 4th year, first class honors, but I did that degree together with other stuff as well, right? So it was a hell of a lot of drive. And I look back at those days, I'm like, geez, what the hell was I smoking? But yeah.
It's ironic though, because it's that conviction. I think most people go through their lives without this clarity of purpose. And it's not necessarily I'm going to be an X, but it's kind of working on this bigger scope of this is what I intend on contributing to the world and the man or woman I'm going to be. And to be frank, especially as entrepreneurs, this journey is so difficult without that kind of North Star compass to keep you accountable. It doesn't matter if you are a billionaire or broke. All of us lie in bed at night looking up at the ceiling going like, oh, wait, hold on. Wait, what's tomorrow hold? So I actually love that. And that's perhaps a good read for folks. 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, if you haven't already read that. You end up graduating top of your class. And I think you mentioned to me that you did want to do a financial mathematics master's. Old Mutual obviously wanted to employ you at some point, not just let you study in perpetuity. So you combined that with your honors year, which is insane to the rest of us, but nonetheless have got through that somehow.
Again, so it was quite a time. Hey, so Old Mutual they weren't keen on me taking an extra year, and they're like, look, they actually initially said no, and there was a lady, Irene Petroni at UC2, who then encouraged me to write to the chief actuary, who like, who the hell is this kid? Why is he writing to me? But to his credit, word came back. He didn't respond, but word came back that, look, I could have the extra year, but not any money. So what I had to do was do the honors and the first year of the program, because it's a 2-year program concurrently. So that was basically 12 subjects to write exams for at the end of 4th year instead of 6. And then in addition to that, also had to work because I needed to finance the next year. So I tutored. So it was just an insane time. But I think there was something that really drove me to do the financial maths master's program, which was kind of like studying actuarial science and seeing what was going on at the time with some of the biggest and most storied insurance companies in the world, the Equitable Life being one of them, and realizing that, hang on a second, there's something that we're not learning in this program. And again, kind of like, just really pursuing the curiosity and saying, damn it, I'm going to actually learn about it and figure this thing out. So that's kind of was a big reason why I actually wanted to study that, because I was like, if I'm going to, it just feels incomplete, right, to not know about this stuff. So I did that and then finished. And I think that helped with, with just the honest project that I was doing and why it was, as impressive as it was back then, because I had a whole body of knowledge to work with. So it was, I drank coffee, but coffee stopped working. So I took stronger stuff.
Sure. Thanks for that life hack, by the way, folks. Free from us here at Startup Club. I'd love you to talk to us about just those first few years at Old Mutual, because, and I'm glad you referenced the project you dug into, because in some respects it positioned you in light of what was going to happen in the global financial markets. This is getting pretty close to 2008 financial crisis, things that could have potentially been avoided, but were just not taken seriously or not hedged, which ironically is the entire insurance business. You get in initially, and I know you'd mentioned you'd wanted to maybe look at more investment style services, and you join a division within Old Mutual that kind of lends that expertise and some of the academic insights you'd acquired. But again, you're 21. 21, 22 years old. You step into this organization, smart academically, figuring it out practically. And then it's almost like your life changes within the organization. Maybe share some of that with our audience.
It's a really good, example of what they say about, luck being preparation meeting opportunity, right? I was just pursuing a curiosity at the time, right? Because I was like, what is going on? And just, maybe a brief little bit of context. The Equitable Life was failing because interest rates are going low after the .com crash. And they had promised clients fixed interest rates, but they didn't do anything about the gap between what they promised and what they could earn. And they just kept killing them, right? And eventually, they had to kind of effectively, wind up. And I was like, well, sounds like a pretty basic error, right? Like, how do you not, but like, why is like, anyway, so I pursued this curiosity, but then when I then enter Old Mutual, I end up because I kind of like studied this stuff, I thought, okay, I'm going to go into investment banking, and I made a big fuss and like, okay, well, fine, you go do this other thing, right? I end up in this sort of division that's dealing with annuities and how we price them. And then the financial crisis hits, literally 6 months into me being there, and it's a proper problem for Old Mutual, because not only did Old Mutual have exposure to variable annuities, very similar to the Equitable Life problem in the US business, but they actually had in the South African business as well. And I'm kind of like in this, just happened to be in this meeting, right? Because I, was a bit of a noisy character. People said, okay, he might know something about this thing because he presented at the actuarial convention his thesis on, any one best paper in the country. So maybe let's hear what he has to say, right? But I don't think everyone in the room knew that I was like a kid, right? So I think I'm sitting there and someone, asked like, but who the hell even knows how to like price this stuff? Yeah, does anyone know? I'm like, put my hand up, and it's actually one of those moments where like what the hell was I thinking? Because it's like, well, and then what, yes. Right? But it was just so pivotal, because that the organization needed someone that actually understood it, and I was just well placed, at the time, and that was the beginning of actually just this huge opportunity to actually build a team around a very, very difficult problem, leveraging technology. And I think I'm very grateful for just the kind of organization that Old Mutual actually was at the time. When I was there, probably still is today, and how that opportunity actually came about. Yeah.
The team you end up starting, the asset liability team, if I'm right, is also the team that you end up meeting your now co-founders, Dylan, Shen, and David. And we'll get into obviously that conversation in a few seconds. But fundamentally, you're in charge of, in time, managing a large portion of the balance sheet for this significant business. The team grows massively. You're still in your 20s doing all of this. That experience, I mean...
Look, so it was unusual in a few ways, in that, like, look, it's Old Mutual. I mean, one of the oldest financial service institutions in the country, if not the oldest, actually. And they at that point entrust me, a 23-year-old, 24-year-old, to build a team to solve this really difficult problem. And first thing I do is I go and I'm like, okay, now that I've got myself into trouble putting my hands up in this meeting, what the hell am I going to do, right? So I had a very, very lucky to have a very good mentor, Stephen Levine. He now runs Quilter in the UK. And I kind of say to Stephen, look, I need some money, to hire people to do this thing. He finds, back then, you can call it first seed round, sure. 500K in rands. And the first thing I do is I actually go and find Shen, because Shen was this like enigmatic character on campus who got when I was in second year maths, I came second, and I always remember when I come second. But Shen came first, but he was a first year student doing second year maths. Never forgot that name. so I went to go look for Shen,
yes.
And a couple of the other team, just basically the smartest people I could find, and be like, guys, how do we do this thing? So that's actually how a lot of the people that, the whole founding team, but a lot of other people that I also worked with, years afterwards, that's how I got in touch with them.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah. We're doing a great disservice to a number of years of your life here, but just in the interest of time, you end up spending 7 years building this business. You take on different responsibilities. You're appointed onto the Old Mutual Exco, and this is by 27, 28, the youngest ever, which is quite remarkable. You stay on the Exco for 3 years, and then by 31, kind of reach this point where you're going, and to be frank, there's so few people in the world, I think, who would have hit that sort of corporate excellence or standard by that age.
Yeah.
I'm curious to understand what was maybe going through your mind at the time. Were you, dare I say, quote unquote, a little bit bored? Were you just excited for a new challenge? Because frankly, you could have spent another 5 years there and retired, I'm sure. So talk to us about that mindset and what had you restless?
So I saw Ralph Mupita on Sunday, actually. He's the guy that, put me on his exco at 28. And he was talking about how much trouble he got into for doing that.
Sure.
And it was a huge bet, right? And a remarkable kind of, I guess, just show of leadership and courage on his part. I finished, do 3 years of that role. So basically, a big part of the job was, help Old Mutual expand on the continent, raise, build a balance sheet management function, which, funny enough, still exists in a big way today at Old Mutual. It's a big team, 15-year-old institution, in the company still. So build that team and then kind of get to a place where I think, look, and there's a combination of what you're saying, which is a bit of like the restlessness, that entrepreneurial bug that we spoke about a while ago that's still there, that I want to. What I did at Old Mutual was kind of building something new inside a big corporate. So in a sense, you get a bit of that, but it wasn't really, the full real thing, right? Which is kind of what I'd always wanted to do. And there was a particular problem that, was just eating a hole in my brain around just advice and how to make it just more accessible and better, right? So that was bugging me now. So there was that, but there was also kind of a thing of just like, I felt that its impact and purpose as an entrepreneur would just be success or failure, right? The impact of like actually, because the way I looked at it back then, look, I was 31, already 3 years on Exco, one of the largest institutions, which now is a listed company in South Africa. No kids, no real financial obligations. If not me, then who, right? If I can't start a business, right, then who, right? And and if the ecosystem needs people to take risk, that's the main duty of an entrepreneur, is that you take risks that others can as well, right? And I felt that I had the opportunity to do that, and I should.
We trust you're enjoying today's episode, produced in partnership with Momentum Group. We're now going to take a quick break and hear from Shelley Rick Hansen before getting back to today's episode.
Hi, I'm Shelley, here from the Momentum Group. Thrilled to be here. Most of you would know about Momentum, one of our client-facing brands, but Momentum Group is a much bigger player in the South African life insurance and financial services industry. We're a proud Level 1 BBBEE group, and we are committed to building and protecting our clients' financial dreams. Alongside Momentum, our other client-facing brands include Metropolitan, Guardrisk, and Eris Properties, and all of them play a key role in achieving our mission, which is to make an impact. One of our key business objectives and drivers at Momentum Group is digital innovation. It's something that we have put at the forefront of our new strategy to make sure that not only are we delivering on the best digital solutions for our clients, and we're also adamant to make an impact through the broader work that we do in the job creation sector of South Africa. What I love about South Africa is the diversity. I love our passion. There is no comparison to our country with our people, because no is not an option. And that is the most powerful thing you can have in a country. The diversity with that determination, that ambition to never give up, to always keep striving. And I think that's what's really important with our entrepreneurs, is we've seen the youth of today really grab their own futures with their own hands and really create things that the future needs, and that we can enable to help them get those winning tech solutions that we need. Entrepreneurs are a pivotal part of our country, especially for companies like Momentum Group, because they are helping to solve problems, they're helping to innovate, and they're helping to create jobs. And I think within the environment of South Africa being a third world country, the way for us to move out there and start operating in a first world manner is through tech entrepreneurs. One of our client-facing brands is GuardRisk, who tailor-make risk solutions in the B2B space. In 2023, GuardRisk came up with a platform called Launchpad, which is all about enabling insurtech innovation and platforms. And in 2023, Launchpad partnered with Startup Club ZA. We saw immense value in the partnership, and we had great interactions with startup insurtech businesses that needed help, needed some mentorship, needed some funding. So as Momentum Group, we just knew we had to get involved in a bigger platform. The beauty about technology is it allows us to operate at scale. It allows us to be very agile, which is incredibly important for us at Momentum Group because of how we service our clients. It also cuts down on costs for clients as well as time. And all of these are really important for us at Momentum Group to create impact. And that's why we're partnering with Startup Club ZA. I remember my first experience at Startup Club, and the energy was electric. Just to have all the innovative minds, all in the tech space, in one area, bouncing ideas off each other, and creating a network that is something that can't actually be matched. It's an energy, it's a passion, and it's something that you can't create. It's got to be sort of brought together and harnessed, and I think that's what Startup Club ZA is doing right. Momentum Group is excited about the future. We're excited about the tech space and making an impact, and we've got some exciting projects in the pipeline, so watch the space. Thanks for having me today, and I'll see you guys soon.
That was Shelley Rick-Hansen, Group Marketing Manager at Momentum Group. Thanks for listening, and now back to today's discussion. I'm curious to know, because that there's an epiphany moment here. So I understand Shen actually left Old Mutual before you, and in classic entrepreneur fashion, you guys spend some time deliberating. What is the thing? What is the idea? I know you'd mentioned you had this burden around financial advisory and making it more accessible, more effective. Talk to us about how you end up eventually leaving the role and transitioning into what was the thing, and importantly, how did you reach that what was the thing moment? This is actually the problem we're going to solve for.
So Shen is a remarkable person. I mean, he's kind of like he's got a very, very clear compass. I mean, just a moral compass, but just he kind of knows himself very well. And I think it dawned on him before it dawned on me that there's an end of an era here, right? You've kind of reached, you're part of the establishment, right? You're no longer the rebel gang, building this, skunk works division in a corner of Old Mutual with its own access control and everything. Those days are gone, right? You're an exco. You need to be responsible, write the policies, and enforce them. And I think that just wasn't, really who we were, right? So he leaves, and I think that kind of makes me really think about, okay, am I going to transition into an institutional person, right? When in my life have I ever been an institutional person? Is this really me? So that kicks off the process of actually, I didn't actually think maybe what I want to do, I can do inside Old Mutual, but, explored it quite in depth with some of the board members and some of the SQ, and quickly realized that, look, if I'm really going to try to tackle independent advice as a problem. So the idea was starting to grow at that point. It wasn't quite the thing because I wasn't sure what the angle was, because at the time, to be honest, I knew nothing about advice, right? I mean, I'd been working on the most esoteric, complicated parts of the insurance value chain, which involves, complicated math and algorithms and computational techniques and high performance. It had very little to do with the customer and individual savings and risk and protection. And, so I knew very little about it. And I was very, very far from the place where I could be cool, so let's do this thing where we're going to start a company that's direct consumer. I was very far from that point.
Yes.
It took about a year, right? So I left, and I think, Shen had left, and we just kind of hang out and talk about all the things that are happening in tech at the time. And so I think it was me, after I left, Dylan and Dave also left, a few other people, Mike LaPere, a bunch of other people that were in that team had kind of moved on, and we used to just hang out. And this thing about financial advice, right? And okay, so who actually works in financial advice? and who builds the tools for advice, and how does an advisor actually do what they do? Because we all had like, when you're leaving a company, you kind of have a bit of an experience with an advisor, right? And we were all like dramatically underwhelmed by like, what it actually involved, and actually now became a topic, right? So speaking to friends, family, like what's been their experience about it, and not sort of like walking away with the simplistic conclusion that everyone walks away with, that advisors are dodgy, right? Or that they don't know what they're doing. It's actually it's got to be more than that, right? Like, these are hardworking, honest people. They're trying to earn a living just like the rest of us, and this is the best that they can do. What's going on there, right? So it was that journey of kind of like really digging into the space and trying to understand, okay, what is happening here? That kind of just got us more and more intrigued. And I think we sort of like, we said, okay, we're going to do something together. We don't know what it was. So we set up a company called Convex Financial, just a nice nerdy sounding thing to do with maths.
Yes.
And we then said, okay, we're going to do something in advice. So we set up something else called Convex Financial Advice. And we kind of potted around, like trying to understand the advice space for like a year before we actually get into, what then became LifeCheq. Yeah.
It's interesting to me because some of the things you haven't mentioned there are, and I think quick anecdote, what I love is maybe this time taken to truly understand the problem.
Yeah.
And it's quite easy to kind of point out, well, financial advice is terrible because advisors are terrible, but actually pulling away the curtain and going, well, hold on, how are they equipped to do their jobs? And what is the experience like for the end customer? And actually, what's that interaction between the respective stakeholders look like?
Yeah.
I think you'd mentioned to me that in the registering of Convex advisors, you couldn't quite convince an actual advisor who had his own financial services book, perhaps working tied agency or independent, to work with you. So you actually get qualified as advisors yourself.
Yep.
Convex becomes its own financial advisory, consulting to clients to really understand this problem. So a great anecdote for people, like if you're gonna understand the problem, it can't just be Google. It needs to be even if that's the first iteration of the venture.
Yeah,
I think that's quite important. Obviously, by mid 2016, 2017, you guys have enough of a business here, enough bandwidth financially and otherwise to actually go work on this thing full time. Super fortunate not to have to raise funding.
Yeah.
Which again, not everyone is privy to, but actually I think a lot more people do have, they don't have the appetite for risk, but they do actually have the financial means sometimes. So that's part of our big mandate, is to encourage more people to take that leap. Talk to me about how this matures from, we could just be another brokerage, to actually becoming the start of LifeCheq. You do raise a little bit of capital and time. If you'd like to talk about that, you're welcome. How does this become a tech startup in South Africa?
So it always was, in the sense that the founding team is myself, David, Shen, Dylan, right? And the thing that brought us together actually at Old Mutual was this high performance computing problem, trying to solve the equitable life type problem for Old Mutual, which turned out to boil down to using, graphics, CUDA GPUs, graphics present cards, to actually model these financial instruments essentially. And we're the first to do it, in insurance globally in a production system. Now, so the obsession of all of us was what happens at the intersection of technology and complicated financial problems. So that was sort of like really if we're a band, that would be the theme of music that we played, right? Is how do you use technology to actually at this intersection? So the vision was there, but the idea behind us realizing that, hang on, we can't get advisors to do this, so we can get close enough to a problem. We need to become advisors ourselves. So Dylan and I write the exams, RE5, RE1, become registered advisors, start seeing the first couple of hundred clients ourselves. The technology part was always being built by Shen and Dave, right? So we'd go see clients, come back. And it was like, our product cycle was daily, right? Go see clients, come back, look at the plan, how we want to build it. Okay, we kind of build out further versions of the model. And I think after a good few iterations of that, we start to kind of form the basic concept of what becomes LifeCheq. And I think what makes our technology successful today, funny enough, is actually rooted in those very early insights, in that we really understood what is it that makes the customer experience of advice really good. Not just for the advisor, but the actual customer experience of it, really good, because it was me and Dylan sitting in front of a client, just like you and I are sitting right now, trying to understand how they plan their life financially.
Like powerful qualitative insights,
Yeah.
Matched with the quantitative. I think it's a really important lesson for those listening here. Very quickly, you do end up raising an angel round, 2016, 2017. You got your ex-boss to invest, so clearly you've done the employee boss thing well as well, and some friends and family. And then in 2018, the business is cruising along quite well. Tech is taking shape. It is known as LifeCheq by then. You get introduced to ARC, the ARC team, and that really is your first proper
institutional
fundraising round, right? Did you need it? What was the process like? You'd never raised cash before formally like that. What was that like?
So we could, I'm sure with every founder you speak to, you go to a whole section on a whole podcast on fundraising. But look, the ARC thing, and I think one of the big advantages of the path I took to come to entrepreneurship was you build a network, you build a bit of a reputation. People get to know what you've been able to do in one context. Big question, can it translate, is what they'll be asking themselves, but at least they know you from one context. So kind of like, through execs, that I'd worked with before we get introduced. So Paul Henratti actually introduced us to Jan van Zyl at ARC, and then we, he quickly takes an interest. Obviously, two extremely smart people. They very, very quickly understand what we're doing and what the potential is. Actually quite a little bit scary how quickly they got it. And so they decided to invest in basically a seed round. Well, let's call it a seed round, so institutional seed round. And ARC didn't do rounds like that. So it was a bit of a, I guess new for both sides, but obviously, they're a big institution.
Sure.
The process, there's quite, nothing is like fundraising. Nothing in life is like fundraising. It's just like, look, you have an investor on the other side who kind of obviously knows this a lot better than you do, and you're new to this, so you got to learn quickly. You got to learn very quickly, and I think we did over the years, but that was our first one. Yeah.
You end up raising circa 20 million in that round. I think you mentioned to me you didn't quite need it, but it spurs growth. It puts you on the radar of folks because you'll need some cash down the road. You look at scaling team, entering new regions.
Yeah.
And this is, again, between technology and I guess the advisory side of the business as well, right?
Correct.
Was this just being received so well by clients? Was it just, oh my word, this is the next big thing? What was kind of the moment that you were like, we're onto something here?
So I think there was a day. So I think if I'm to say what was the day that I thought we had product market fit, we had one client who, and we're kind of like early days, getting a few clients, kind of getting a bit of traction. This client sent us a new referral every single day for 2 months, right? 60 people from one client. And that became like, and I was like, what is going on here, right? So that's kind of when okay, there's definitely something here. There's all kind of still Cape Town based, and I think at the time, part of just another important part of like why the funding and why we did it was that we realized that like we'd sort of started this journey of okay, let's get close to the problem so we can actually see how it works and become advised. But it then became a thing of actually, hang on a second, what we're doing is actually a completely new concept of financial advice, right? So for it to scale beyond what we're currently doing, we actually it needs to have market credibility, right? So we're going to need to invest in building that presence, that brand, that understanding in the market, the lingo. So we, basically created this thing, holistic lifestyle-based financial planning, or we just called it a LifeCheq plan.
Sure.
And what's one of the most gratifying things for me is almost 10 years later, it's 9 years now, 10 years next year, how much the industry lingo around financial advice all revolves around the word holistic financial planning, holistic advice. It wasn't that popular back then. It was a wealth management concept back then. Now,
high net worth, private.
Exactly. Yeah. So, our presence in the scene and actually being quite loud about how we're doing it popularized the idea that, hang on a second, everybody should have holistic lifestyle-based financial planning. Now, insurers, banks, everyone's not doing it these days. Yep. But that's what we needed the capital for, so that it creates that market, essentially.
I think you'd mentioned to our live audience that it wasn't like a one and done problem either. It's not, you begin to realize if it is holistic, you are solving for systems, for compliance, for front-facing, for just the fact that customers don't know what they want, risk appraisal. What was, and what, maybe just surmise, what is the LifeCheq product? What is that whole experience? So talk to me as I was a customer, and give us some insights as to what makes this platform so unique.
So the thing about a LifeCheq plan, when you compare it to what traditional financial advice was like before, was that if you're someone who doesn't have, if you have 5 million rand to invest and you can put down cash, then you're sorted, right? We don't need to worry about you right now, right? But if you kind of someone who's like, at that stage in your life where you're actually juggling a lot of life goals, like, you still probably want to do a bit of travel, maybe with family, you're raising a family, you're planning one, you've got a business that you want to start, you want life experience you want to have, you've got all these competing life priorities. And what's actually really difficult is trying to figure out, can you even do all of these things? And which one of them are more important? Now, I can't come and ask you, okay, so what are your goals, right? It's like, well, I don't know. Maybe I want to do these things, anyway, right? Yeah, exactly, yeah. Right. But what I can expose to you is what are the trade-offs among the things that you think you want to do. And by unearthing those trade-offs, help you think through what your life plan from a financial perspective can actually be. So that you're solving this multi-dimensional, problem of competing life goals, plus all the complexity of product fulfillment that goes with that, and all the complexity of the compliance aspect of financial advice. They're trying to basically fit all of that conversation, which is normally, a 2-day body of work for an advisor doing it properly, into a 1-hour conversation over a coffee. And that required a 20x, reduction in cost of doing a financial plan, right? And it took us 7 years to get that, to get the cost to be that low and to get the whole system to kind of work that way. But that was really the hard thing, is that people didn't do holistic financial advice for clients who weren't in the wealth segment because it simply took too much time. It was too expensive for how much money the person had.
To your point earlier, it's not necessarily a lack of want either. I think advisors are just, they're also trying to make, this is the way they make their living, right?
Exactly.
And they've got unfortunately, the more clients, the merrier, force them to become, some respect, salespeople. And this industry has been tarnished by a few bad actors, but they are the exception and not the rule.
Yeah.
2019, you are thinking about raising a Series A. And this is, again, double down, enhance the team, distribution. So much of the space is just trust. It's an incredibly tough space to break into from an advertising spend perspective, brand perspective, because these are some of the biggest top line spenders in the ad space.
Yeah.
So it makes a lot of sense. But 2020 changes almost everything, right? For most businesses. And where ordinarily I would meet my financial advisor over a coffee, even for an intro, and talk to me about what you do, and it's can't quite do that for a little while. So talk to us about what that season did for the business. Not necessarily bad things. In fact, some respects it accelerated a lot. So maybe share some of that experience with our audience.
So product market fit is a wonderful thing, but it can also be a curse, right?
Sure.
If it comes at you at sort of like when you're not quite ready for it, right? So we went into that sort of COVID period, on a pretty good wave, right? So we had this like very natural word of mouth referral, almost like community forming around LifeCheq with clients, and we we're in Joburg, we're in Cape Town, we're opening office in Pretoria, about to open in Durban, and we kind of growing our advisor force, and our plan was, look, we're going to get this thing to, a few hundred advisors, and kind of then we'll be an established market presence. Then the technology aspect of it can take the fore and become more of a platform that, so that this was a kind of a multi-year thing that we were planning in our minds. COVID hits us, and we actually, our lead count goes 8x in 3 months, right? And we have about, at the time, like 30 advisors, 25, 30 advisors. And we needed 100, right? Instantly. And we couldn't, get to 100. So we kind of like, and there's a tricky thing about some businesses where you don't appreciate that there's actually a bit of a marketplace thing happening there, where you solve product market fit on the demand side, but you don't simultaneously solve it on the supply side, right? So we didn't have a way to go from 30 to 100 advisors instantly. And it became very clear to us that, the flaw in our thinking was that the day that you actually crack the demand side is the day that you need to crack the supply side as well, right?
Sure.
And therefore you actually have both sides of it. So, so that got us to start thinking about our business quite differently, as effectively as an enterprise business. And you know, basically a platform that financial advisors, clients, and product providers can kind of connect around. And that really became the genesis of the shape of our business as it is today.
It's also such an interesting, I don't want to say full pivot, but we as tech founders are often disrupting a space, and as a result hold our cards pretty close to our chest. We see other incumbents or entrants as competitors, and I appreciate how soberly you as the business have had to go, well, actually, even those advisors are technically competitors. If we want to win financial advice and make it accessible, what if we enable these people as opposed to compete with these people?
Look,
hence the enterprise transition.
I don't want to give the impression that it was like a, you know, it was
No,
such a logical...
I doubt that was easy.
We actually chased away the first 10 would-be clients because we're like, go away, that's not our business. We don't sell software to people like you. We have our own thing. So, but you're right. It did take a bit of humility in the end to say, actually, you know what? Hang on a second. You know, maybe this is what we should be doing.
It does also allow your client base, though, when you do that, to go from circa 3,000 to tens of thousands within a relatively short space of time. So quite a cool lesson there, being a B2B2C business as well, even if it's just one of the other product lines. You do end up raising some capital from Naspers, which most folks will know. And that allows you to kind of get this product enterprise ready. I think you mentioned that was 21, Moneyland's 22. There's always some things going back and forth with investors. What's life been like since then, right? So the last 2 years, things have normalized somewhat. You've got the LifeCheq business now. And I know you and I have had a couple of offline conversations about fundraising and when and why and where the business might be. Talk to me about the last 2 years. You know, what has life been like?
So we ended up raising our Series A from Naspers Foundry. Second time lucky, because the first time was actually mid-COVID, mid-pivot, you know. And so when we do that round, it's kind of like to actually really double down on like this enterprise-led, you know, approach to the business. And it was a little bit of a, call it bet the company moment, in that like if we had failed to pull up enterprise, that would have been the end of that, right? Because you kind of like you only get so many pivots, you know, until the game's up. You know,
and turns out most investors don't want to fund a pivot.
No, they don't. You know, they don't, especially not when it's the pivot in the middle of DD. Right? So So we end up doing that round with Naspers, and I think it's a double down on enterprise. We do enterprise, you know, really well. You know, we have some incredible partners, you know, that we work with along the way. Some, you know, big institutional, you know, players in SA who kind of really share our vision for what they want to do in kind of making advice accessible as well. You know, in the mass markets and across the whole spectrum of you know what is South Africa. So we do that really well. I think the growth has been incredible. I mean, it's you know 100x you know user growth in sort of you know 2-3 years time, 10x revenue growth. You know, and kind of like getting to a place where, you know, you have the sort of the scale, right, and the breadth and depth in the team to really start to kind of, you know, do some interesting things. And just what we can do now product wise, you know, in terms of innovation, you know, and so on is now obviously beyond just what us as founders could create. It's now you've got a ton of smart people, right, you know, running, you know, large chunks of the business that, you know, I don't even pay attention to necessarily day to day, but doing incredibly well. It just transforms everything. So, you know, fundraising used well, right, and to drive the right moments in your strategy can be incredibly transformative.
10x revenue, user base over 200,000 clients now across the platform, team at about 75 as of I think yesterday you mentioned to me, which is pretty remarkable, and very much on this mission to not only disrupt the South African financial services and access thereof in the advisory space, but broader emerging markets as well. I think I want to take just a few moments because we've painted a lot of like exciting pictures here. Fundraising, good numbers, all of this. This is not an easy journey. right, by any means. It's year 8 or potentially year 8 now, going into year 9. If I had to ask you, what was a really tough moment in building this business over the last couple of years? Is there one distinctly? Most of the time, there's one that distinctly comes to mind and jumps out at you.
Early 2021 was really tough. We had to, so part of the pivot was we had to retrench people because there were, we had to make some tough choices about where the business was going to go and who was kind of part of that new future. We couldn't do everything, so we had to pick which things we could do and which things we couldn't. And it was really, I think, when you're a naive, founder, you think, oh, I'll never do that. I'm a good person. I wouldn't do that to people on my team. You have to, right?
Yep.
Sometimes, and it's a really, really difficult moment. And I think and some of those decisions, even though they were pushing things in the right direction, took us to existential risk, right? And kind of had to so if I talk about some of the really tough moments, I mean, people like Ralph Mupita, who was mentor at the time. I think having access to people like that to actually kind of just get advice, get support. At the time, I think you need people like that. In your corner who have the experience, a bit of network to help as well. That can kind of help you because you're not going to get through that alone, right? I think there is this illusion of how tough founders are, but it's actually a pretty lonely place, right? And sometimes you just need someone to tell you that they still believe in you, right? Yeah.
Has it been just talking about the and thank you for sharing that, by the way. I appreciate the candor. You've got a founding team of 4 friends, turned colleagues, turned now co-founders of a business. Has that been an easy dynamic over time? Has it been, we're so sold out on this mission, perhaps, that we put all the other stuff aside, or does it come with complexity itself as well?
We were very lucky in having, call it 7 years prior work experience together, right? So we knew, look, these are the sort of the type of people that we are, right? These are the roles that we play well and so on. But even then, despite that it hasn't been, always smooth sailing, I think there's a lot of, what's the word? Glamorization, or people glamorize what founders do, and I think it takes different tolls on different people, right? Especially when you're more than one founder, right? And I think I now 9 years in, kind of have a much better appreciation of okay, what do you actually think about when you're going into the founding of a business, and who you look for, and what conversations are important to have kind of early on. We're very fortunate in that, look, I mean, I talk to Shen every day, Dylan, often, look, so Dave Jacka, right at the start, was going to be with us he said, look, I'm doing 5 years, right? Sure. And then he's taking a sabbatical and going to, kind of explore a bit of, other life goals. Sure. Which we were all very happy with and supported. And I think he's done that. So there's 3 active founders in the business right now. And I think it's a privilege, right? If I look, so Shen, Dylan, and I have 15 years now, work experience. I mean, people our age don't have 16-year-old kids. Sure. It's,
true. That's true.
So it's a privilege to kind of have productive professional relationships like that for a really long time. I don't think it's the norm. Yeah.
Tell us very quickly the next 2-3 years. What there's 3 questions I'll ask you before I let you go today. Firstly, next 2-3 years for LifeCheq, what perfect world, what would you expect to see from the business? What can folks expect to see come out of the LifeCheq stable?
So maybe let me preface it by just talking a little bit about the mission that we're on and why this thing has been worth 10 years
Please.
of my life,
Yeah.
almost, right? So I spoke about the advice thing and, why it matters, kind of, people who, middle income people trying to have, achieve life goals, but not yet wealthy, etc. But if I think about, so my aunt who raised me when my dad was here, and, so before we came back to South Africa, her her shop in Kumasi burnt down, right? During these fires. She didn't have the concept of insurance, right? So now that's like, call it R500,000 of wealth that's gone, right? For her, that's not going to be replaced. So she was kind of like too old to start again. And the power of like just, a solution to a problem like that is what creates a middle class, right? And a middle class that persists from one generation to the next. So if that wealth was still there, we pass on to her children, who would then be able to build on that. Now, I think what a lot of people don't appreciate about the financial service industry and the power of that kind of middle class compounding, this sort of, capital formation, is that, look, at peak, a lot of people don't know this, but at peak, Old Mutual accounted for 15% of the JSE in terms of its assets that it held, divided by the JSE market cap, 15%. And then you got to include Sanlam, which was also a mutual. And then you kind of like close maybe a quarter of the JSE, at the time was middle class people's savings, right? And that's what's built South Africa. A lot of the banks, steel companies were funded from those businesses. And I think when you look at the continent, you look at a lot of emerging markets, the thing that we lack, other than durable institutions, is actually just a way for the middle class to persist from one generation to the next. And financial planning is really about that, right? So, the mission for me, what has been about the from reading that 7 Habits book and thinking about what I want to do, is actually really been about, look, how do I spend time on something that is going to have a huge multiplier effect on the economic development of the continent, right? So that's what animates me today. And when you ask your question about what is it that we're going to, what should people expect to see from LifeCheq, is just that a redoubling of our efforts to achieve that mission. So, expanding not only in South Africa, across not just, the middle income market, the mass market, everyone that has enough, the way you think about it is everyone who has enough money to survive today and plan something for tomorrow is a potential customer we can impact. And the 2 billion such people in emerging markets. And we want to, expand in South Africa, but also elsewhere on the continent, in other emerging markets, partner with some of the best institutions around. Some of them we already partner with, and sort of, really try to make an impact and try to make advice accessible to everyone.
Yeah, Boots, it's bold, it's hard, but goodness me, what a problem to go after for your lifetime. And ordinarily we would ask our guests, we'd close the show by asking them what success looks like for them personally. But I think it's probably easy to say, in your case, you've seen financial success early, but clearly the conviction you carry in trying to solve this very important problem long beyond probably your lifetime or even that of your kids is almost tangible. So thank you for sharing that with us. I think the last thing I will do is, you mentioned a few moments ago, 9 years in, almost 10 years of your life committed to doing this. Are some things as a founder, oh my goodness, I'm sure we all wish we knew, but one of the benefits of a chat like this is some folks may not have to learn some of these lessons themselves. You've got an opportunity to perhaps communicate something to current founders, would-be founders across the country right now. What would be maybe one thing common mistake you see, or really just incredible piece of advice you've received over the last couple of years? What is something you might want to share with our audience?
Well, first, let me start with would-be founders.
Please.
Don't do it. I'm kidding. No, I think I wouldn't say don't do it. I would say that don't think it's not a glamorous thing to start a company. I think a friend of mine joked that he's also a founder. We sometimes commiserate, and he's like, starting a business is you absolutely shouldn't do it unless there's something wrong with you, and this is somehow the cure, right? To start a business is what can cure the thing that's wrong with you. But in all seriousness, I do think that people tend to think that you start a company because you want to work for yourself, or you want to. That's not the reason. And you have to be obsessed with the problem at a level of obsession that is almost insane to carry you through how hard it really gets, right? When it gets really dark, you have to have something that still pulls you up, right? So if you don't have that level of conviction for something, it's just not worth it. And it's not the better ways to make money. They really are, right?
It can't be just about the money.
Exactly,
Sure.
right? Join a startup, join a corporate. There are many ways to kind of get involved in innovation. So it's not for everyone, but for those who can, right, and those who are sort of driven and like I said, that there is something wrong with you in a good way, in that like you're obsessed by a problem that you just have to solve, right? It's your duty, right? If you can do it, if you're in a position to actually be able to, it's your duty to try. In a country like ours, we need that, right? We need people to try and take risk. And I wish we had a different culture around what happens when you fail than we do in South Africa. But hopefully, after as the ecosystem matures, that will get better. So that's what I'd say to would-be founders. To founders, I'd say, look after your health, right? That's really important. I think there were times where I didn't, and I luckily, kind of intervened before it got bad. But I'd say look after your health. I'd say learn like a maniac, right? Just don't stop learning. You might think you know a lot about something, but just don't stop learning. I mean, I think when I was in my best, it was when I wasn't learning enough, right? I was kind of, too much in what I had in my head. But keep learning, read about like other entrepreneurs, other ecosystems, other businesses all the time, and what they do, how they do it. And I think the other thing is maybe just on a topic we touched on earlier, which is, that fundraising is not success, right? Getting customers, growing revenue, that's success. We're coming out of a cycle where that seemed to be the metric that everyone, kind of celebrated, but it's not, right? Fundraising and announcements, I think, tend to take way more airtime than they should, and less about actually what are you doing for your customers, right? And what problems have you solved, and what impact are you making, and so on. So, yeah, that's what I'd say.
Very good. I feel like I could have asked you that halfway in the episode, and we could have spent all the time on these lessons you've learned, right? But great sobriety for would-be founders. I think great insights for current founders, and it is the stuff we neglect in pursuit of the problem, success, whatever. So thank you for sharing that, Abu. And I must tell you, I've thoroughly enjoyed today's session. I think I've always enjoyed our candor and the fact that you can share some of the practicalities about what's amazing about this journey, but what's also quite hard and what's sobering. But at the same time, to catalyze more people to enter the space and obsess over making the world around them better, going after big problems. You can't listen to this episode and not walk away with that inspiration. So thank you so much for sharing with us today. Really, it's a fantastic privilege to have you on the show, and we're very excited to see what happens in all things LifeCheq in the next year, 2, 3. Ladies and gentlemen, it's Mr. Abu Addae, co-founder and CEO of LifeCheq. Thank you, Abu.
Thanks, Matt.
Thanks so much for listening to today's episode. That was Abu Addae, co-founder and CEO of LifeCheq. I'm Matthew Marsden, and if you enjoyed the show, please be sure to subscribe to our channel, follow us on our socials, and share this with your network. We'll see you next time.